This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
Was. Part of the reason we had so much fun beating Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Hey, let's get it going on a Monday. Welcome in, Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent. Hope your Monday morning's off to a great start. Good morning, UFAs. Anthony starts us off with, a couple minutes after 8 o'clock, getting the live stream up and rolling. Wanted to make sure we're good technically. You guys give me the old thumbs downs if we're having any kind of audio issues, but sounding good on my end. And happy to be here, coming off of a pretty busy weekend in June for sure. If you're going nationally, you got to go Stanley Cup, Colorado Avalanche, former Charleston Stingrays coach Jared Bednar winning the championship there and has won it at multiple levels, including the ECHL all the way up to the Stanley Cup. Feel good story there. Ole Miss, College World Series champs, barely got into the tournament. Last four in. Number 3 seed, first time a number 3 or number 4 seed has won the College World Series since 2015. Crazy to me that it's happened a lot more often from that standpoint than the number 1 overall seed winning. That hadn't happened since 1999. Gamecock football, big recruiting weekend on campus. Interesting developments. Maybe you guys can help me out exactly with what exactly happened, or what exactly is going on there. So that's how I'm coming to you this Monday morning. I was caught up in a lot of baseball this weekend. Freddie Freeman back in Atlanta and David Cohn on the ESPN Sunday night broadcast last night. Freddie's good at expressing his emotions. Good for him. I'm just right there with David Cohn, the former Mets ace and the Yankees, and he was on the Royals for a while too, and and a bunch of baseball cards. I watched David Cohn a bunch growing up, and it was hilarious. It's like, not me, man. I got anger issues, and I just can't express my emotions. That he's very healthy. I'm not that healthy. What Cohn was saying, and it's kind of how I was seeing the whole thing, and it was just a really interesting weekend to watch the Atlanta crowd's reaction, to watch Freddie Freeman's reaction, to hear his comments, to see really good games. Dodgers ended up taking 2 out of 3 from Atlanta. Unfortunately, last night it was an extra innings, and Jansen couldn't close out a 2-0 lead in the 9th inning. So that was a tough one to watch from a Braves standpoint. But it was really odd to see Freddie Freeman as a visiting first baseman, and I wonder if Matt Olson hadn't have been playing first there, and Freddie Freeman it was a line drive in the 9th inning that went off the glove with 2 outs. Well, would Freeman have made that play? Who knows? And then Olsen gets a hit in the 9th or the 10th. I think it was in the 10th to keep the game going. He goes to do his little chop on first base, and that accidentally hits Freddie in the face. And Freeman first is like, whoa, and then gives him the old good game tap. So no major deal there. It's just an emotional weekend overall from that standpoint. And you never know what to make of these recruiting weekends, right? At least I don't. Especially these days with social media being what it is. And we get so little of the actual goings on. We'll never know. And then, I guess eventually we'll know, right? You could look back years later and say, oh, that was the weekend that A, B, C, player A, B, and C, who went on to be really good players. They ended up making their decision, or that's what swayed them to come to South Carolina, and that was massive. Or you go the other way around and say, man, these really good players were on campus. They didn't close them out. There were 2 welcome home tweets yesterday from Shane Beamer. One making the news public, and 3-star wide receiver C.J. Adams from the state of Georgia. Big body guy, 6'3", 210, I think I read. When you hear 3-star, or at least when I hear 3-star, I think that means relatively under the radar. When I hear a Deebo Samuel comparison, I think that's a pretty good comparison. That's going to be tough to live up to, but I think that's kind of like the new trend for really, let's say, really physical wide receivers. Let's put it that way. Never forget Will Muschamp saying that Deebo Samuel had in the lower half of a running back. He's like a running back in his lower half, just meaning that he's going to break tackles, so physical, strong. And now we've seen it, obviously, in the NFL level, taken to the next level, and is hopefully, from Deebo's standpoint, what's going to get him paid and work this contract issue out that he's working through with the San Francisco 49ers. But that's the comparison to C.J. Adams, which those things are wildly unfair. I think Pharaoh Cooper was always a really strong wide receiver, I thought, for the Gamecocks, and a really productive one as well, if we're going another NFL comparison. And then it makes it 8 commits in the last 2 weeks. I think the total class of 2023 now up to 10 guys, including an offensive line transfer or offensive line JUCO commit. And that one I thought was odd, that popped out on Friday from junior. We've seen junior college commits, and especially along the offensive line, that's not out of the norm from an SEC standpoint, South Carolina standpoint. But I don't think we've ever seen one from the state of Utah, and originally played high school football in California, in San Diego. So I thought that was interesting. Isaiah Jada is his name, 6'6", 310. You're going to get a junior college offensive lineman. You're going to have some numbers like that. And with Jazz Turnentine leaving the program, was kind of that similar type guy on paper coming in. Massive body, experienced, expected to step in and to play an important role. At times did Turnentine, but obviously didn't turn out completely well for him, and he moved on in his career. And now we'll see what another guy can come in and do, add some depth at least, and Gamecock coaches and fans hoping that it'll be some production from that guy in Jada here in the last few days, making it 8 again known commits, or 8 in the last 2 weeks, 10 total, and 1 still to go public. I think with the way that Shane Beamer was tweeting out, said had a great meeting with at least one other non-public commit right now. So we'll see. But now you got a bit of a dead period for 3 weeks or so, maybe 4 weeks. So college football coaches might be able to exhale a little bit at this point before really getting after it and ramping up for the season. I think this is the time where you can look ahead, look back to look ahead, right? You look at a bunch of game film, you get game plans going in the works, maybe finalized for the first couple of games, and everything's set up for the season. That's where the college football calendar is. This camp controversy, I'm not sure. Maybe you guys can help me out. It sounded like Dutch Fork High School standout Antonio Williams has committed to Clemson, was at Carolina watching camp, and was asked to leave. And again, I don't have details on the story or inside sources or anything else. Seeing the social media stuff. I don't know what to make of it, other than there's a guy that's going to be playing for Clemson and headed up there in a couple of days. And from the Carolina standpoint, you don't want him checking out having a negative impact on a big recruiting weekend. Obviously, from the player standpoint, he didn't think there was anything wrong. There hadn't been anything communicated to him, doesn't seem like, that he should not be there. And it's a bit of a social media back and forth, it seemed like. And the Carolina-Clemson rivalry, live it again. We had Stuart Lake, former Gamecock baseball coach, telling us last week how much Eric Bakich he thinks is going to bring the Carolina-Clemson rivalry feel back to the baseball field. I don't know what it's going to take to bring it back in my mind from the football standpoint. It's going to take at least a competitive game, which we haven't seen in a long time. I can understand if you're coming at it from the Clemson standpoint, how you say, hey, even if the Gamecocks pull out a win this coming season, it's still not much of an even rivalry. But maybe a game into the fourth quarter, at least, it's going to make me – it's going to take to make me feel like that rivalry is back anywhere where it used to be, anywhere at all. So we'll see if that's going to happen at all anytime soon. This adds to it a little bit. A little subheader. Let's get to one of the best Cinderella runs we've seen in college baseball. Now, again, hasn't been unprecedented. It was Virginia doing it in 2015 as a number 3 seed as well, I think, that year. Fresno State, back in the early 2000s, did it as a 4 seed, went on to win the College World Series. Mike Bianco has been a tremendous college baseball coach for a long time. Second time he's gotten Ole Miss to the College World Series, longest tenured SEC head coach, doing it for a couple of decades, I think, and Stuart Lake being one of those former assistants at Ole Miss, so he's given us a little bit of behind the scenes, certainly given us confirmation of what a good coach, a good program we got going at Ole Miss. And good morning to you, Hope. Pat says the North Greenville Crusaders check it in. Pat Monteith, welcome, sir. So it was the exact opposite kind of run that North Greenville had in Division II is what we just saw from Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss, a controversial pick just to make the tournament. 7-14 at one time. Had been a highly touted team going into the season. Failed to live up to those expectations, but then got it going late. And, man, one of the few teams only lose one game in the whole NCAA tournament run. That Gamecocks run the 2011 team had of going straight through. That was a big chunk of that 22-game win streak in the NCAA tournament. It just was so odd, so rare, so dominant. But that's what Ole Miss was, by and large, this postseason, with just one loss to Arkansas. What was that, last Wednesday now? One loss, that was it. Doing it against a seemingly equally hot Oklahoma team, another team kind of under the radar, not one of those top 16 seeds. But Ole Miss, a great story for the College World Series. The Sunday afternoon thing I thought was a little odd. I get it. You had the Stanley Cup Finals in Game 6 last night. So from the programming standpoint, just a reminder, I guess, of where college baseball is. And for those of us who live in college baseball crazy states, it's hard to wrap our brains around, I think, in a lot of ways. How about the state of Mississippi, 2 in a row? I saw the first time since South Carolina lost out in 2012. So it was right after that, maybe. Yeah, it was 2013 and 2014, I think. South Carolina lost out in 2012 to Arizona. The year after that, it was UCLA winning, and I think the year after that, Cal won, is what I saw. So that's the last time a state has had 2 different teams win it in back-to-back years. We got Holly and Gregory weighing in this morning as well. Good morning to you guys. Thanks for checking out the program. So the calendar year, or the sports year, completely done now in college. 2021, 2022 in the books, and now springing forward to 2022, 2023. Just to say those numbers out loud, mind-boggling to someone born in 1977, but that's where we are. Troy, getting in on this rule. We talked about it before. Yesterday's game could have been different if not for this stupidest rule in all of sports. And when did it come up last? It was a College World Series game early on, right? Jason, glad to be back. I had a great time playing golf with my pops over the weekend, by the way. Didn't play golf worth a dang, like usual. And it was not a championship weekend for us, but that's why no Friday show. But happy to be back at it for a full week this week. And we got the 4th of July next week. So right smack in the dog days of summer, where we can really use our creative minds, put it that way, and have some fun here. But Troy's talking about Oklahoma's first run when it looked like they took the lead. Runner going down first base. I believe this was off a bunt. It was certainly off a play that was on the inside, coming from I think it was the pitcher making a throw to first base. Runner is in the inside of that box, that lane, the line that only until recently, I've been around baseball my entire life, only until last several years, I realized that was even the rule, that you had to run in the dirt in between the two lines, basically in foul territory, and then come back when you get to the base and kind of reach over to the left, because the full base is on the other side of foul territory. That's why I agree, Troy. It's just dumb. Dumb rule. Wasn't called, unlike the last several instances, right? It was that World Series with the Nationals several years ago that really got me going on this. And then the latest example, I think it was actually, that's what it was. It was Maryland and UConn, the super regional, where it went against Maryland. And it didn't make any sense. It's just so anti-common sense. Frustrating to watch. It made a little bit more sense, or I guess maybe now I'm more conditioned to that being called. But still, no one was flagrantly out of the baseline. It wasn't called an out on the field, unlike the last couple of instances, but was reviewed and overruled. And by the letter of the law, by the way the rule is written, yep, they got it right. But the old spirit of the game, man, that's why I'm with you, Troy. Worst rule in sports. So that could have changed things for sure. But big picture, zooming out, Ole Miss and the pitching staff, absolutely incredible. Speaking of pitching staffs, the big SEC news yesterday is that LSU hired the Minnesota Twins pitching coach. Twins are leading the AL Central right now. It could not be more of the offseason for college baseball as we start here today. And yet that's how much power LSU baseball commands. That's how good a job the LSU pitching coach is, that you quit the pitching coach job as the Minnesota Twins while the Twins are in first place in the AL Central, and you go down to LSU. And Ole Miss is the 7th SEC team to win, at 7th different school to win the College World Series. It's 14 total titles, I think, since the format was changed to the regionals, super regionals, basically late 90s on. And the conference with the next most national championships in that same span is the Pac-12 with 6. 14-6, more than double. And the fact that the SEC has more different schools to win a national championship than any other conference has national championships in that period is just the stat of dominance for sure. And Ole Miss just adding to it. And tough not to feel good for them, or Mike Bianco. Tim Elko, their first baseman, playing through the torn ACL last year. Was a little disappointed we didn't get the choreographed Swayze showers going out in Omaha, but man, Ole Miss fans showed up, didn't they? I think 90% Ole Miss fans to 10% Oklahoma fans was the estimation. We saw it last year with Mississippi State, and that was the first national championship for a Mississippi school in baseball, and you see it. It's crazy how that works, isn't it, man? One breakthrough, and it then becomes the trend. It becomes doable. We saw it with South Carolina baseball going back-to-back national champs in 2010 and 11, and then we saw it with the first time that Ray Tanner broke through in the College World Series in 2002. They made it 3-4. and then it was another 3-year run in 10, 11, and 12. As I'm talking about it, it also dawns on me, hey, it might have been less of some kind of mental breakthrough and more of they had the same really good players in those stretches. Well, that has a lot to do with it too. Can't ignore Christian Walker and Jackie Bradley Jr., Whit Merrifield in 2010, all part of those teams. And then 02, 3, and 4, we already talked about Landon Powell, and that was his group back in the day. So it does have a ton to do with that, having really, really, really good players helping you go on the run. But there have been a bunch of really, really good players with really good careers at schools all over the place. Justin Smoke is a great example, along with Reese Havens from the Gamecock standpoint. Now you see other guys in the big leagues all over the place. Clark Schmidt years with Will Crow. Obviously, really, really talented up in the major leagues now, but never making it through the College World Series. But a feel-good story, man. And that's, to me, what Omaha's all about. This year you had the jello shot battle between Ole Miss and Arkansas, and the relatively Cinderella run from Oklahoma as well. The Ole Miss one is undoubtedly a Cinderella run. Barely getting into the NCAA tournament and then rolling to the title. The ultimate Cinderella to me will always be Villanova, 1985 NCAA tournament. I know for a lot of you who might have a year or a few years on me, I think the given in the sports world, especially from college basketball standpoint, happened several years before. Was that 82? Jim Valvano at NC State doing it against Phi Slamma Jamma. And the famous celebration scene afterwards, Valvano going nuts and just looking for anybody to go run and grab and hug. But Cinderella is one of, if not the main reason that sports is so attractive, so consistent. You can get it in so many different levels. Just trying to equate it to what we saw over the weekend as well from a baseball standpoint in the big leagues. Maybe because I grew up in North Carolina in the Southeast and the Braves were terrible when I grew up, I still feel like the Braves to some degree are Cinderellas, or might be seen as that nationally, or were seen as that maybe before this last one. I don't know, but 14 straight division titles, kind of ridiculous to think of an organization as a Cinderella, but all those great teams and very little postseason success, all the national media coverage going to the Yankees and the Red Sox, very rarely to the Braves, unless there's a story like what we had over the weekend. And that's a good segue to get into this. Let's see what Troy has to say. He says, Ole Miss winning the championship, another example of why college football is the best sport on the planet, because the regular season matters. Okay. So you can't get a Cinderella run like what we just saw in college football because you've eliminated yourself with too many losses, right? I disagree with where Troy's coming from. Again, because I love the Cinderella runs, man. I love that you have to be the best team on the court, on the field, on the floor at the right time to win the championship. And I really don't like the fact that a team can get eliminated. A good team can get eliminated with plenty more games to go. So that's why I'm all for moving the college football playoff out. Get 8, 12 teams in there. Let's make it a little bit more exciting down the stretch. The fact that the regular season matters. I mean, we all know the regular season matters in these other sports too, especially in baseball, man. Since 2015, that's the last time a non-number 1 or 2 seed has made a run and won a a title, and even just getting to the College World Series can be so difficult doing it away from home. So you play well in the regular season, you get to play at home in the postseason, your odds go up significantly. I think it's 75%, somewhere in there. It's really high. It's definitely more than 60%. Now, this year was kind of an anomaly. A lot of teams went on the road in the Super Regionals and went on to Omaha. Yeah, I'm with you, Jan. Late night for me last night as well. Braves and extras. Didn't check out the Nashville NASCAR race. Chase Elliott a winner. Okay. Flipped over after the Braves game, or no, let's see, after the College World Series game. Is that what it was? Nope. Still trying to get it all in my head here. So yeah, the Braves game. Yeah, maybe it was after the Braves game ended. It was right when the hockey game ended as well. It wasn't too terribly late for a late inning game. At least it wasn't like an American League day. Got to start your Cinderella run the first week in September in college football. Yeah, to some degree. I mean, we saw Coastal Carolina and Louisiana Lafayette last couple of years make tremendous runs. You can't do that seemingly still at this point in college football, unless you're a big boy Power 5 / Notre Dame team. Run to the national championship. That's the problem I got with the college football stuff. The ridiculous UCF calling themselves national champs several years ago with the undefeated season. It's so dumb, right? No, you weren't. Stop it. But you didn't have a chance. I understand why you feel completely it's completely unfair. System's rigged against you. That's not the way a system should work. College football is certainly anywhere from perfect. Maybe we can help continue to get it closer to being a little bit more fair, or Cinderella's having more of a chance. But this emotional weekend for Freddie Freeman, I don't know if you guys saw it at all. We've never seen it in sports. And I know it's easy to do recency bias and be hyperbolic talking about sports and hop up on a soapbox and say something like that. But a guy in his prime who is coming off of a World Series championship after a massive World Series drought for the organization chooses to play closer to where he grew up, closer to where his family is, the dominant organization, if not in baseball, certainly in the National League, the LA Dodgers, instead of re-sign with the organization he's been with his entire career, where he is absolutely beloved. And I heard it again on the broadcast last night and found it fascinating that Matt Olson is from the Atlanta area. His parents live in the Atlanta area, and they were big Freddie Freeman fans. So imagine you play first base for the Braves. You're having a really good season. And the opposite first baseman is an absolute fan favorite. It was a massive number of fans this weekend in Atlanta, 100,000 plus when you combine the 3 days or maybe just 4 days. You got even last night, the last game of the series, a standing ovation for Freddie Freeman coming to the plate. So rare, but so, I think, special and complicated. It's a complicated situation that Freeman was in. Or he certainly made it complicated by going to a different team, right? But good for Braves fans, man, expressing their appreciation. I thought it was going to work out perfectly, where you show your appreciation for a legend of the franchise. That's what Freddie Freeman is. Will always be. One of the greatest ever to put on a Braves uniform. Just coming off a World Series championship, got to put on his ring in front of the crowd and the whole thing at the beginning of the series. But I thought it was going to work out perfectly, that he's going to do okay. They win the first game of the series, and the Braves could come back and win. But that's not how it worked. And the Dodgers stealing one late last night, and that made it feel maybe a little different, or maybe that'll make it easier for everybody to just move on now. But there were talks about, I guess Clayton Kershaw made a comment about making sure that the Dodgers didn't feel like second fiddle for Freeman. be interesting. I mean, it was just an interesting scene to see. First of all, someone so emotional during a game, even. I mean, Freeman having to kind of wipe away tears. You can tell getting a little misty there with the standing ovations, and then his comments were, I mean, it's tough to watch just how emotional he was. But tough from a Braves fan standpoint as well to watch him play well, play for the other team, first of all, play well, and then beat your team. Not fun to see, but unique, special, notable for sure. That's why I bring it up on the show. Freddie Freeman's emotional weekend in Atlanta, where the Dodgers ended up taking two, ended up winning last night's game in extra innings, and the Braves 5 games back. The Mets also losing yesterday. Had a chance to cut it to 4, couldn't quite get it done. That 2-0 lead in the ninth. That's one that's gonna maybe stick for a little while. But the run in June has been tremendous and gotten Atlanta, but I think I saw top 4 records, I think, in the National League. So gotten the Braves right back to where they're used to being as we head towards the All-Star break. And very, very relevant in the National League, in the big leagues. And this weekend, I think probably at the top of that list because of Freddie Freeman's return and all the emotion displayed on both sides. And that's the exact opposite of the emotion around the Carolina-Clemson rivalry, or anyone that paid attention to any kind of controversy. Again, it was Dutch Fork High School standout Antonio Williams. He's headed to Clemson, was at Carolina camp, I think, supporting his teammates. I'm assuming Dutch Fork had a 7-on-7 team out there, and as the story goes, was asked to leave because he's about to start up Clemson preseason camp, about to head that way. Big recruiting weekend on campus for the Gamecock. So I can see from an optics standpoint, really the last thing you want is a big-time local prospect around that shows your rival around other guys, just even there. But unfortunate story, I think, in so many ways. Like if that was going to be the take from the coaching staff, you would think you'd be able to relay that message or get that idea out there so it doesn't happen. You just say, hey, man, you should probably not be here, not going to be welcome. We will have to ask you to leave. That's how we see this situation. I can't imagine. Maybe that's just where this thing is, that if that was communicated to say, oh, I'm going to show up anyway, you guys are going to have to kick me out kind of thing. I wouldn't think that would be the case, but just a classic recruiting rivalry story scene, I guess, maybe, that happened over the weekend where nobody went, right? There are no winners there. No, college football isn't the winner. The Carolina-Clemson rivalry is not the winner. Like that had to happen. That's where we're at. Am interested to see how the recruiting class continues to be evaluated. When you see 3-star guys and C.J. Adams, the guy who went public yesterday, there were 2 who told Shane Beamer, it looks like, that they were committing to the class of 2023 or committing to Carolina. When he puts out a couple of welcome home tweets, that's the news, the bat signal. C.J. Adams confirming it. And when I see his offer list, which included maybe Virginia Tech, Duke, Louisville, Kentucky, teams like that, certainly not the upper echelon of programs in college football from a recruiting standpoint. But who knows how Adams or any of these guys will end up turning out and how important he can be. Obviously, if Justin Stepp, the wide receivers coach for Carolina, thinks he can play, he's got a good shot. And again, comparison I mentioned earlier to Deebo Samuel from a just a stature, a physical nature, being a physical type runner with the football after he gets it. That's something you like to read as a fan for sure. But how it equates now to college football, that's totally different, right? I mean, you rarely see guys who aren't physical specimens in high school, either from a speed standpoint, quickness standpoint, strength standpoint. So you gotta then take it to the absolute next level, especially from the strength deal. That might be the most difficult one to translate. But it's one thing to run over guys in high school. It's a much different thing to run over them in the SEC. So that was the football note. Nationally, from a football standpoint, it was Alabama getting a commitment from, I believe, a 4 or 5-star guy, a defensive back. I think he was an in-state guy, choosing Alabama over some other big SEC programs, Auburn, Georgia, Texas A&M, notably. Arch Manning was the headline on Friday when we did not do a show, and wanted to touch on that. Going to Texas, I was surprised. Surprised that, I mean, I guess that is an SEC kind of tie, and that will be Arch Manning's future by and large. Playing in the SEC when Texas makes the move, even if it's all the way until 2025. But I was surprised it wasn't one of the legacy schools of the Manning family. Surprised, or an in-state school like LSU. And surprised with Steve Sarkisian, where he is taking over that program. All of that kind of surprised me with the Arch Manning deal. With, again, maybe the biggest high school recruit that we've seen, that I might have seen in my lifetime, right? Because of the name, and then because of the timing of the name, image, and likeness deal. I mean, the name specifically, or named after his grandfather. This is Cooper's son now. Cooper being the oldest Manning brother, who ended up getting hurt and had his college career cut short as a wide receiver at Ole Miss. But committing to the University of Texas, and man, all eyes on him. And from a South Carolina standpoint, hilarious to see Sarkisian's reaction is all gas, no brakes. The slogan that Will Muschamp used in what was it, year 2? Right after year 2, when that got instituted after the Outback Bowl win and the whole thing. Trying to think. Chris Sims was a really good Texas quarterback in my time. Vince Young, I think, being at the peak there. Major Applewhite, a good one. Who else we got on the list? You guys yelling at your devices right now. We've seen a few. Certainly hasn't been a quarterback factory, and that's why surprised to see it. I get it, but the lack of family ties, and then the lack of automatic success. Like these wide receivers, these big-time wide receivers going to Ohio State, don't blame them a bit, man. They're just churning out the top draft picks one after another after another. It makes tons of sense. The big-time quarterbacks that have gone to Ohio State, like Quinn Ewers from the state of Texas, who originally committed to Texas, and then Tom Herman was out. He committed, ended up going to Ohio State. I didn't blame him at all. Ohio State's been putting out some quarterbacks, not necessarily a ton with success in the NFL. We'll see how Justin Fields ends up turning out. But from a college football standpoint, I get it specifically, like at a position, or when you have the family ties. That's why, I mean, I admire anyone who goes out on their own and says, in any family who supports it in that way, right? There are a bunch of families where there's pressure to go to where the parents went to, or brother and sister went to, or whatever. But there are, I think most probably do it the right way. And then some still end up going to the same school, right? Even if they're saying, nope, this is your life, it's your decision, we're here to support you. I think Emmitt Smith might be the one I saw out there from a a sports standpoint, a sports dad standpoint that said it the best. Like, hey, yeah, Florida was for me. That was my life. That was for me, and my son is completely different. He's got his own path, and I'm going to support him however I can. Because it's tricky, right? Because you have the relationship with your alma mater, and you don't want to burn bridges there. You don't want to be seen as unsupportive, but you also can't pigeonhole your kid to go in the exact same place that you went to. So clearly that's not the case for Arch Manning, and now is going to be, I mean, when you have that type of pedigree, you have that type of talent, obviously, and you have the new circumstances, the newness of name, image, likeness all wrapped in, man. It doesn't shock me that he went to Texas. It is a bit of a surprise, though. I would not have picked that one. I'm sure the recruiting experts might have seen this one coming down the stretch. But now what's going to happen? It always seems to me like the Texas guys specifically are really out there on an island when it comes to college football scrutiny. The Texas coaches as well, right? We saw Tom Herman chewed up, spit out. Didn't work out great there. He was a rising star, and Gamecock fans know all about it, having kind of zeroed in on him being the guy to replace Steve Spurrier, and that didn't work out. What he did with Houston and taking them to a win over Florida State and really helping to tear down the Florida State program, I think. But being maybe the rising star in college football, and then you got to be so good at that, and you got to be real good instantly. And that's the part about being a high school quarterback, moving on to college, being a blue chip guy, having the name, the whole thing. Will be fascinating to see the Arch Manning Texas evolution now coming up in so many ways, right? See the numbers come out of how much money he's making, seeing how the team does with Steve Sarkisian, and then how Arch Manning plays with the Longhorns. But surprised that Texas ended up beating out LSU. I think is probably who I would put number one with the Louisiana ties, even though obviously Peyton and Eli didn't go there, but Ole Miss and Tennessee I thought would have. And if you're fans of those schools, can't be pleased to see that happening for sure. But I think Ole Miss fans might be a little bit too hungover this morning to worry about that after celebrating a national championship, first one, and on the Cinderella run out in Omaha, that just was magic. It was magic, and had some magic left yesterday when they got down 2-1, and the call stood on the Oklahoma batter who got hit. Right, it could have definitely been overturned because the way the rule is written, you're not supposed to make a move. You don't have to get out of the way when you get hit by a pitch, but you can't move into it. And that's where it becomes a complete judgment call, right? How much movement is going towards the ball with a starting your swing, and then how much the guys sometimes stick out an elbow or stick out a knee. But you can see the obvious ones. Yesterday wasn't obvious at all. It was completely up to interpretation. That back leg moved, and I was fine with the call on the field, and I didn't want to see it overturned. I hate when it's not obvious, and somebody in the replay booth just wants to flex their muscle and say, yep, I can definitely tell that this should be overturned, and we're going with my interpretation of this instead of the official on the field, on the court, whatever. So I think that should always be the default, right? Replay's there for egregious stuff, obvious stuff. Get it going, especially in baseball. How long it takes is ridiculous. So I was with that call. I was fine with that call because it wasn't an egregious move out to get in the way of a ball. It would have been seen as on purpose. I get that. Wasn't seen like that on the field, and you keep it moving. But so that's an example. That one and the little blue right over the shortstop's head. That when stuff like that goes against you, that's when I start thinking, oh man, this might not be their day. We might get a game 3 College World Series, which is kind of maybe what I was pulling for most out of anything. But then Oklahoma brings in their closer, and you talk about haunting. I feel like that's going to haunt that poor kid forever. It's like clearly the catcher got crossed up, going to the backstop, and oh man, and then another one gets back there. So a bit of a sloppy last game, but again, why I will always advocate for college baseball. Because consistently you see things in college baseball. You do see amazing players and tremendous talent, and especially now. Ben Joyce throwing 105.5 at Tennessee. You got Melendez hitting 30-plus home runs this year. They got so many guys that get to the big league real quick after college baseball these days. You also have stuff that you just very rarely see. I mean, two balls to get by the catcher to score 2 runs in the national championship game that turn out to be the difference. I guess that maybe has happened in the Big League World Series, but I can't recall it in my lifetime. You just get some plays that it seemed very consistent this year. The slides into second or third head first, where the hand beats the tag, originally called safe, and yet somehow they can't keep themselves on the base, or the body even like disengages, I guess is the technical term, with the base going from the hand to the foot, and then they get called out on replay. It is odd. Weird. Just see some weird stuff that kind of keeps me guessing, and is one of the reasons why I love college baseball as much as I do. DC weighing in on Arch Manning here. Is he being overhyped because of the last name? I heard from another report that Tennessee's quarterback commit was the better of the two. I think they said he was from California. See, this is where the recruiting world can just make my head hurt. First of all, nobody knows. Very simply. I mean, I guess you can know right now which high school player is better, but that's the thing. Nobody cares who's better right now. You care who's going to be the better player in college. And there's so many variables that go into that, right? Including where you choose to go to college and who coaches you. But that's also going to be, okay, who wrote the article? I mean, that industry is something, man. It has grown so much in the last couple of decades. And, I always am leery of anyone who is kind of the expert in their field and then will make money off of their recommendation as an expert in that field. Like, I'll never forget it. Having someone come out to my house trying to sell it in Columbia, my first house, and it was a foundation person. And it dawned on me, like, you're under my house, and then you're going to tell me exactly how much work that you're going to end up doing and how the extent of the damage and the whole thing. Like, I got no clue. Absolutely no clue. You could tell me all kinds of stuff and take some kind of random picture and say, yep, right here is because I'm saying this and this. Like, how many other people do I need to get out there, or is everybody kind of in on that? I felt like we needed to have some sort of separation there, right? Whoever was making the determination of the work done shouldn't be the one that also gets to turn around and put the money in the pocket. But that's how so many industries work, right? But this one, from a college recruiting standpoint, it is that much more blinded in a lot of ways, because if your job is is to follow recruiting for a specific school, well, it's really easy, I think, to get tunnel vision in and to be seen as a kind of an advocate for a certain school. It's really hard, I think, to not have some bias creep in one way or another. If it's a person that the school gets to evaluate him maybe a little bit more favorably than had he gone somewhere else. I know um, guys that I know personally who do this, like Chris Clark and Wes Mitchell for the Gamecocks, I think, they have really good reputations in that world. But I think they would be maybe the first ones to tell you that, oh yeah, there are some characters out there who you just can't believe, or who are clearly compromised. And then we all heard the stories of guys' rankings nationally jump up significantly if they choose a certain perennial powerhouse program, as opposed to a different program where you don't get a bump in recruiting numbers. And unfortunately, I've heard the stories of guys being told almost flat out, hey, if you want to be seen as you want to move from a 3-star to a 4-star, this is what has to happen. You got to go to this camp, or you got to do this or that, as opposed to, yeah, we can clearly see. And this wasn't like you have to run this certain time or do this certain thing on the field. This was just pure off the field stuff. And the only reason that this guy got bumped up from 3 stars to 4 stars is because shady stuff. So, of course, at DC, I think you can hear that about anybody. I would put my money. I think the percentage chances are the guy with the last name of Manning is going to be pretty good at quarterback in college. And let's see, when's the last Tennessee quarterback to be pretty good? Josh Dobbs is pretty good. Seems like Hendon Hooker's going to end up being pretty good. He certainly finished the season really good last year. We had the Clawson guys, okay careers, right? T. Martin, unfortunately, from the Gamecock perspective, was 21 passes in a row, really good back in that national championship season where Tennessee rolls through Williams-Brice Stadium. So and with the way that Josh Heupel coaches quarterbacks, you think Tennessee guys have really good chances to be good moving forward. Yeah, the Texas thing is, Colt McCoy, pretty good high school quarterback. Vince Young at the top, one of the best ever. Like I mentioned, Major Applewhite, Chris Sims, they've had some really good college quarterbacks. But nobody's ever come in there like Arch Manning. Nobody in the history of football has ever come in a program like Arch Manning. So much pressure, and so you might as well, in that way. Like that's Texas size pressure and expectations wherever you're going to go. So you might as well just kind of double it down, right? Just be right there out in the middle for everybody to see. And that's what Arch Manning is for sure. Add in the SEC transfer over there, the conversion to an SEC program. You couldn't have more stuff going on, right? Name, image, and likeness. Your uncle's rewriting how live sports is done on television, how it's presented visually, having their Monday Night Football team off of Hall of Fame career. And I think Eli's still yet to go in the Hall of Fame, but he'll be in there whenever he wants to be, I'm sure. Being named after your Hall of Fame grandfather. I can't imagine being in his shoes, but Texas wins out the sweepstakes. Huge win for Steve Sarkisian and that program, and one that you kind of got to have. Still haven't seen huge wins necessarily maybe for Shane Beamer in year number 2. That was the part of the big weekend. I know a couple of 4-star guys on campus and trying to finish up strong. This cycle, really, this summer season dead period hits, I think, now for about a month or so. So 2 committing to Shane Beamer yesterday, 1 doing it publicly, and that wide receiver from the state of Georgia, and C.J. Adams, thought to be a 3-star guy. Louisville, Kentucky, I think Virginia Tech and Duke on the offer list. But another unnamed, non-public commit, which always leads to much speculation. And the number's up to 10 in the class. 10 commits. Still plenty more moves to make. And with the transfer portal being what it is, the future of big-time college recruiting being what it is, who knows where it'll go. Ole Miss, a great reminder of you never know how it's going to go in college baseball. And to me, was kind of like a nice guy finishing first story. I don't know everything about Mike Bianco, but I have seen his teams, his program up close and personal for a bunch of years now. Getting to talk to Stuart Lake about his time at Ole Miss as an assistant for Bianco for 3 years back in not quite 20 years ago now, 15-ish years ago. And then I mentioned to you guys several times the social media excerpts that I've seen of the season is the documentary series on Ole Miss. I haven't watched the season, but I've seen these excerpts about where Bianco just tells stories to his team in kind of the pregame huddle, and he's an expert. And the stories are tremendous, and they're told really well. And the fact that they're done right there on the field with the whole team, and well, it's to me unique, a unique approach, and just classic. That this year, Ole Miss was struggling, and you get fans yapping, right? Fans start running their mouths and saying, clearly, Ole Miss baseball needs a new direction, right? This Mike Bianco guy, who has been a fantastic coach for decades, is not the guy to continue coaching Ole Miss. That was a relatively popular take, and again, I get it from a production standpoint. You're 7-14. Fans ain't going to be happy at any SEC program. Mississippi State has another year where they finish last, and they're not going to be happy with their national championship winning coach Chris Lemonis. They weren't happy with him this year. But it gets to a point where it turns from unhappiness to unacceptable. And a lot of Ole Miss fans, I think, were there and now feel a little bit differently about their coach and program. And to me, maybe it's one of those times where you just pull off the Band-Aid and, man, all bets are off. All right. We are going for broke here. We have nothing to lose. Let's get after it. And obviously something changed. Bianco asked about it all the time and says he can't remember one specific game or put his finger on what made the difference, how the team switched from being underperforming and on their way out of the NCAA tournament and then doing enough to sneak in and obviously being dominant, losing one game in the College World Series run, the NCAA tournament run. Crazy, man. Thin line, and we're seeing it right now at Carolina and Clemson on the other side. Right? It used to be South Carolina was the state that dominated college baseball back in 2010, playing for a spot in the National Championship Series. Carolina and Clemson and famous Michael Roth game helped the Gamecock stay alive and then go on to win the national championship. But very similar program, and now it has cycled Mississippi's way. It's tough not to, from my standpoint, admire the run they're on. I think I saw a tweet last night. I think the account is at SEC Baseball saying that every fan base deserves to go on a run like what Ole Miss this year, what Mississippi State fans last year got to experience. And I couldn't agree with that more wholeheartedly because of the college baseball experience. It's so unique and so much fun. I think the problem from the Gamecock standpoint is it happened multiple times. And it got to be more the expectation than the appreciation for how special those runs are and how much you have to do to get there year after year after year, and how an impossible standard that is. I mean, Ole Miss, a great example. I was surprised. I didn't realize Mike Yank had only been to 2 College World Series, only a second one this year, showing just how difficult it is. All you can do is give yourself a chance. Was always the Ray Tanner line. Put yourself in position, right? And then you got to have things go your way. 2000, a great example. From the Gamecock perspective, number 1 overall national seed, didn't make it to the College World Series. 2010 had to go do it on the road. Completely different type seasons, but in position, one position being much stronger than the other, being the number 1 overall national seed, playing at home, and then not being able to finish that deal, but it came back around a little bit later. As long as you continue to pump the players through the program, that give your team, your program, your fans a chance to go on that run, and then it's just magic. I'm wondering if any of you other guys, Ole Miss kind of an odd Cinderella, right? Being a preseason number 1 team. Tennessee, a good example of that this year. Except Tennessee comes with other stuff, right? They didn't just have good players. They had good players who seemingly, a lot of them did not care about showing respect to the opponent or the game or even from flipping the bird when they rounded first base. I mean, just a different level. So I think what you're saying is Tennessee's a great example of a really, really talented team with a bunch of good players that still couldn't get to the College World Series. I think most of us would just say, yep, baseball card. And not sure if that one does come around. I think it might have come around just this year, right? Come around to bite Tennessee on that one. As opposed to, was it the Auburn scene? I think when Ole Miss eliminated Auburn clearly good sports and a heck of a run and the whole thing, and not one of those where you say good riddance, get out of there. One of those saying, oh, stinks for them that their tremendous Cinderella run, they were on one, finished last in the SEC West, had come to an end. But you only get one team to win that thing, man. And watching Ole Miss do it was pretty fantastic. Hope says what goes around comes around for sure, and loved it with Tennessee. I think all non-Tennessee fans did. Mark, weighing in on the Braves game last night, says it was depressing. I wanted Jan to know about that. Yeah, it was just a strange weekend in so many ways with Freddie Freeman's return. Maybe it was just because of the reaction being so vulnerable, I think is the right word. Freddie couldn't talk about it without crying to start the weekend, and couldn't keep it all under control on the field even. And I don't remember other players being like that. Certainly baseball players in June. But again, this circumstance is so unique too. Having played his entire career with the Braves, having just won a World Series, knowing that the contract situation was what it was on that run last year. To see Dansby Swanson afterwards with this celebration basically advocate for the Braves to sign Freddie, and I think he knew that he was wanted, but obviously the Dodgers making him a better deal and being from the state of California factoring in, so almost choosing kind of family his natural family over the baseball family, or ended up choosing the natural family over the baseball family. Great. One strike away from a win, yeah, no doubt. And that's the worst, right? And Chance has been good for Atlanta. The bullpen's been great. I think the best in the big league. So not a typical year where you can just complain about the bullpen time after time after time repeatedly. And then for the ball to go off of Olson's glove there in the ninth inning for the 2-run hit to tie the game up, that was another one where, to me, that's where it's not depressing. It just stinks, right? Oh, that close to winning the thing right there. We wanted to do it, and I thought it was going to end perfectly where Atlanta fans get to cheer for Freddie Freeman. He gets to wave and do a few things, and still they go out not winning the series. That would be ideal, perfect, especially in Atlanta where you keep the momentum going. But June has been so amazing for Atlanta. Maybe a little easier to stomach. 5 games back from the Mets, and I think it's 4th best, maybe 3rd best even. Dodgers, Mets, up there as the top 2 records in the National League, I believe. Atlanta right there at 3rd or 4th now, having made this run. So I admire Freddie Freeman for putting it out there like he did, and it just shows to me what a significant shift we've seen in public emotions from athletes, maybe people in general, right? It is a different world. What last Friday showed us, right? The overturning Roe versus Wade and everything that came with that from a social media standpoint and the whole thing. That's a terrible scene in Greenville yesterday at the protest where people were arrested, and it was tough to watch. You saw that social media video where there was altercations, I think might be the best way to put it, with protesters and police security. Ugh, awful. So I just bring that up just to say maybe seeing a guy like Freddie Freeman expressing his emotions much differently than most typical players. I mean, I remember being taught that growing up, like, hey, man, you should always be even keel as a baseball player, especially if you're a hitter in the batter's box. Don't show emotion, the whole thing. And through the years, seen so many guys not that, right? And then the ugly scene in baseball yesterday was that Angels Mariners, 8 guys kicked out after that brawl. Brutal. But Freeman never struck me as a real emotional guy. But I guess that makes sense then. I think I can definitely be that way, not showing a lot of outward emotion, internalizing it, and then being put in the situation that he's put in over the weekend, man. You can't ignore it. And really human and easy to connect with for me. And not one of those that you can easily dismiss and saying, oh, I don't feel bad for Freddie. He took a bunch of money. Well, if he had just done that, it would be one thing, right? But knowing that he's from the state of California and you got family concerns with your kids growing up, and you get the opportunity to go do that, like how can you blame a guy? And certainly from the Braves standpoint, obviously you got to appreciate everything not only he did production-wise as a player, but clearly as a leader and a person and a guy. And so to see him just put it all out there, man. I mean, hardly could talk without crying. And what the joke was, he cried for the cycle in the first game, or good for him. So a dramatic weekend from that standpoint for the Braves. May have a career in broadcasting coming up. I don't know about that. He didn't strike me as being a broadcast type guy, but I don't know. I don't know if Smoltz or Glavine did either, and they're doing it these days too. I'm sure he'll have the opportunity if he wants it. he strikes me more as a guy who would be maybe more interested in doing instruction, like being a roving instructor, kind of like Chipper Jones is, just getting in with hitters and going through the technical aspects of that. I've seen a great video of Freddie in the cage with the Braves from several years ago, and just talking about his pregame routine and growing up and hitting with his dad, doing it so much. And this is one just like an off the tee kind of deal. It just seemed like that. He seems like that kind of comfort level guy where that's his thing. Such an amazing hitter. And I'm trying to think of examples of guys that have gone on to careers in broadcasting, specifically in baseball. It's pitcher heavy, seems like. Eckersley, Pedro Martinez, Glavine and Smoltz, I mentioned. I guess John Kruk did it for a long time as a first baseman, maybe one of the examples. So, but I guess what you're talking about, just connecting with the emotions and the whole thing. And as far as being a popular guy, that was the tricky part, I think, where this thing's coming to now. Maybe now that this happened and it's all out of the way, it'd be easy in the future to say, yep, did that, and now we're moving on, right? Like when Clayton Kershaw makes the comment, like, I hope the Dodgers hope we're not feeling like second fiddle or playing second fiddle to the former team, because there is that. That's a tricky spot for a guy like Freeman to be in, right? That you don't. So much attention put on him and the return, and so much emotion was focused that way that I can see where other guys would chirp a little bit. So now you're going to see how strong the Dodgers are moving forward and exactly where Freddie Freeman's place is and how that's going to work. But clearly it didn't affect the Dodgers negatively last night, going on to get the extra innings win and stealing one from the Braves there. Was going to be feeling like Ole Miss would go in the underdog again. It had Oklahoma stolen that game last night, had held on to their 2-1 lead when they popped a little bloop out in left field over the shortstop's head. I thought Oklahoma was going to go on and win that thing. But Ole Miss, just bucking the system and any kind of percentages in so many ways in this postseason. That's the pitching, man, in college baseball, where numbers get crooked real quick in a lot of different ways. We saw it last night for Ole Miss's offense. Oklahoma just throwing them a couple runs there late. But to be that good on the mound and defensively, and obviously could hit the ball like they've always done here in the last couple of decades, seemingly. The recipe for Ole Miss to pull off the Cinderella run. And the scene in Omaha, man. And if you guys have not been and you like college baseball or you like baseball at all, I highly recommend it. Put it at the top of the list. Do that. Because it is absolutely unique. And it's hard. I know ESPN tries to do it, and having it stretch out over as many days as it does, maybe a better opportunity to capture everything that's involved in Omaha, but I don't think you can do it. You can't do it real justice unless you go out there and experience it for yourself. So not a fantastic College World Series down in the books, by the way. It took us forever just to get a close game last week in that Arkansas-Ole Miss game. Everything else was decided by 4 runs or more. At least we got the final game, that 10-3 game with back-to-back-to-back homers Saturday night. That's where the score was not quite indicative of how close that game was. That was a really good game for a long time. But then the back-to-back-to-back, it was a great example of Ole Miss magic this season. was the first two guys, and the first one specifically, his first at-bat of the game, lefty on lefty, and popped it right out there. Then his number 9 hole hitter, I think after that, Harrison popped it out for Ole Miss. And then you got the right-hander keeping it going from back to back to back. It reminded me of the absolute ridiculous one for the Gamecocks in the Super Regional at Athens in 2005, I think it was. 5 in a row. I was going to do the back-to-back, but it's hard to count that many, right? And such a ridiculous feat. But after that third one went out, Oklahoma did change pitchers, but it wouldn't have shocked me if they just kept popping them out there with what Ole Miss did this season and parlayed it into a national championship, and good for Ole Miss. That fan base embracing it, and that's part of the unique environment of college baseball, and that's what we got to see over the weekend, and you got to see the celebration, and now we'll be really interested to see how it continues for Ole Miss, because it was fascinating to watch Mississippi State go from national champion to last in the SEC this year. A great example of how nothing is guaranteed, especially if you get some marquee injuries. I don't know if Mark Kingston remains as a South Carolina head coach had that not happened. I think it was very fortunate for him that happened to be a clear reminder right in the league of how difficult it is to win, especially with significant injuries, especially when those injuries are pitchers. And it happened to the Gamecocks, obviously, this year. Not coming off a national championship season, but having come off at least an NCAA tournament. But now where does the Ole Miss program go? Are they able to do what we saw the South Carolina programs do? We've seen so many programs, once they do it once and get to Omaha, they are able to get back there, and they have the confidence, they have the experience that gives them the edge in the postseason. Will that be what Ole Miss turns into, or will it go back to being a bit of an up and down, enigmatic type deal like they were this year? I mean, to an nth degree, right? Number 1 in some preseason polls in the country, and then 7-14, and then back on top. Crazy roller coaster ride. But again, part of what makes college baseball so fun, man. I know that's part of what attracts college football fans to the recruiting news cycle, and maybe hit its peak over the weekend in a lot of ways. I think on a college coach's calendar, I think this past weekend is the one. I think they had the cookout at Carolina, and they do these things. They set these things up accordingly, right? I think this was where you ramp up your recruiting season towards in a lot of ways, or how you can tie things up and say, this is going to be the big one. This is where we're pointing to. Now you got the dead period after this. Then you get, obviously, preseason camp going and the whole thing. So that's why I say the college football recruiting calendar really ramped up to this past weekend. And 2 guys committing to Carolina yesterday, one of them going public, and 3-star wide receiver C.J. Adams. 6'3", 210, I think is what I read, measurable-wise. A comparison to Deebo Samuel and a strong lower half and the whole thing. And wide receiver is clearly where the Gamecocks need upgrades, need more production. Went to the transfer portal this past offseason to try to get that, and I think that was a wise move. And we'll see if Antoine Wells from James Madison, Corey Rucker from Arkansas State can step up in the level of competition and be anywhere near as productive as they were at their former schools where they were really productive. And that's a different model than we've seen for the last couple of Carolina receivers that came in. Jalen Brooks, not super productive. I believe he was the Wingate guy, but not super productive numbers. And the same with the St. Francis wide receiver. I'm going to say E.J. Manuel incorrectly. E.J. Jenkins, not super productive numbers. And I feel like that's what you got to have at those levels to set yourself up to have a chance for success. And the numbers at James Madison, Arkansas State, better for Wells and Rucker, and I think it does set them up. And those jumps up, there we go, in competition, not as drastic as the ones we've seen before. So I think it's more realistic to project those guys to be contributors immediately and to be relatively significant pieces in the Gamecock offense, which needs more pieces we saw last year, and especially at wide receiver. Josh Vann, good season. Seems like a guy you can count on going into this year. He made a lot more plays than I think a lot of us expected last year. But he was kind of the guy to do that on the outside, and that was about it. So Carolina needs more production there. Need to have a consistent running game to maybe give those guys more opportunities to allow for the game plan to open up a little bit, to keep defenses from being able to scheme up against the pass or be able to get to the quarterback that much more aggressively. And then I think just the natural second year of having an offensive coordinator system in Marcus Satterfield will be helpful there. I think Marshawn Lloyd is absolutely key to Carolina's season in so many ways. I mean, Spencer Rattler, obviously number one. Quarterback's always going to be number one, but got to have the weapons around him as well. And Marshawn Lloyd seems like a weapon. It wasn't last year. Just wasn't. Coming off the ACL, no fault of his own, right? When you are an explosive athlete, explosive running back, and you're coming off ACL surgery, it's just logical that you're not going to be that guy immediately. But I think from what I saw a little bit in spring ball, got a chance to get back to that explosive guy that came on campus right out of high school. Unfortunately, suffered the injury. So for me, that's where I see the crucial part of Gamecock football and the development right now on the offensive side of the ball. Number one, Rattler's got to have a good command of the offense and play well. But when I saw him at Manning Passing Academy, social media over the weekend, chuck a 65-yarder through the uprights. I think that's what they were doing one day, just throwing the ball through the uprights from past midfield. Measurables are there. Experience is there. Past production is there. The relationship with the head coach is there. A lot of things in place. Now it's a matter of, all right, what can you do in a different type of offense? And how consistent can you be to help what was a struggling offense become a lot more productive and consistent and be what the Gamecocks need it to be? You don't have to be that bowl game offense every single game, but you got to be a lot closer to that every single game than you were in a lot of other games last season. Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Kentucky. And the quickest, easiest way to make that happen is to have the guy that's throwing the ball, that's touching the ball in every single play, making the right decisions, making some big-time throws and play. And obviously the way you can do that more consistently is to have guys around him making plays as well, and especially in the run game. You can run the ball relatively consistently, I think it's going to open up so much more. And maybe just instill confidence as well. I think that's the weird thing about that end of the Will Muschamp era, right? The 2-8 season. First of all, coming off of the COVID year, so weird in so many ways. SEC only schedule, few fans, and I think the more we get removed from that season, the more difficult it will be for me to put it in perspective for maybe people who didn't experience it, or even to remember it with those who were there at those games too. And the fact that Kevin Harris was able to run as wild as he did, and the Gamecock still didn't have more success. Crazy. But the identity was there, right? They're going to run the football. That turned out to be about all they did. And Colin Hill turned out to not be a guy who could get an SEC offense to go. And then Luke Doty at the end was kind of running for his life, and there wasn't much they could do. Luke Doty last year, because of the injury and the limited snaps, didn't turn out to take a step forward, no pun intended. Zeb Nolan kind of was who he was, a guy who understood the offense, but wasn't going to consistently throw you into wins. Jason Brown did that in a game or two, was able to make some massive plays, but clearly didn't show the coaches enough that he was going to be that guy every single game. Also would make the occasional mistake as well. And now moving on to Virginia Tech, it's going to be fascinating to watch him there this year. And to carry on Joyner, what he did in the bowl game still blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. What Marcus Satterfield ends up doing with him in Joyner's final year will be really interesting to see too. But then what Rattler brings to the table, just from the quarterback position, man, the pedigree, how highly touted he was at a high school, for the physical skills, but then combined with what he's been through most recently. Fascinating. Going through the benching, very public, basically Oklahoma's fan base kind of turning against him. Watching Lincoln Riley jet from the program. Caleb Williams jet from the program to Southern Cal. Coming all the way across the country, being an Arizona guy, but coming to South Carolina. Crazy in a lot of ways. But just so many ingredients that add up for such an interesting 2022 for Carolina football, and why I'm looking forward to talking about it here in the next several months as we continue to build toward the season, when I think 68 days away today. I'm not a big countdown guy. I don't believe that's how we should all live our lives, counting down to something else, that we're kind of missing the point of today. So that's why you don't see the countdown going on. But I get it. You got that. I mean, I remember the number for a reason. I am looking forward to college football season as much as anybody, for sure, and going to have some fun talking about it in the next couple of months, building up to it. We'll bring in some different perspectives from other programs as well to really break down everything that's going on around those programs too. Because, I mean, you look at South Carolina nationally and you say, yeah, maybe an interesting story. Maybe worth some note out there, but obviously not tremendous expectations from a lot of people. And what is it? I got the win total here. Let me click on that real quick. As I was about to say it, I was about to say 6.5, but I don't even know if it's that high for the Gamecocks going in here in 2022. 5.5. Yeah. From VegasInsider.com is what I'm looking at. I mean, other teams that have 5.5 for instance, the first one I see is Oregon State, right? I think that's a pretty decent comparison nationally. Oregon State doesn't get much national pub. They haven't really deserved to. And I think it's fair to say that that's where South Carolina's been. Maryland, a 5.5. They're in the Big Ten. Kentucky's at 8.5. That is crazy to me. A full 3 games better, and Kentucky at a full game better than LSU this year at 7.5. Again, according to VegasInsider.com, over under total wins in the 12-game regular season. Georgia Tech at 3.5, so it could be worse. Illinois, Indiana, 4.5 each. Oh, Georgia Southern at 4.5. Surprising to me. Coastal Carolina at 8. Colorado at 3.5. Man, some of these programs have been so far up and down. Good for Coastal Carolina on the upside, right? Colorado, oof, on the downside. And just a few more of these as I continue to scroll through. Arkansas just at 6.5. I'm a bit surprised by that, knowing what kind of season they could have. Auburn just at 5.5. So it's not just Carolina that isn't seen as a sure double-digit type win team, even 8-win type deal. But again, those were just the regular season. So kind of tells me, and not surprisingly, last year going in, it was 3.5. I think the Gamecocks were over-under wise from a national standpoint. Ended up winning 6 in the regular season, and obviously the bowl game, I think, changed a lot of perceptions. I know it did mine. I mean, I went from, I thought it was a good job done by Shane Beamer in 2021. A good first year. A good solid first year. And I thought Carolina was going to be on the other side of that bowl game in North Carolina. And we would say, hey, look, that was a nice first year. 6-7, improved from 2-8 the year before, or 2-10. Sorry, I forget what I try to block all those out. 2-8. It was a nice first year, good start. Nothing to thump your chest about. Nothing to get too excited about. Still a lot to prove. But that bowl game to me solidified so much, right? And I think you get to learn a lot about where the program is from a motivation or attitude standpoint in a lot of these bowl games. You know, typically the team that wants to be there the most wins. But it can be such an indictment on your program if you're not that team, especially if you're in the position that the Gamecocks were, right? Such a young staff, a new staff, so many young, new players that still had so much to prove. Like Sam Howell at North Carolina didn't have much to prove at all. He's just going out and looking to cap off a career in a positive way. Mac Brown, a Duke Mayo Bowl win, wasn't going to go in the top of his trophy case. So retrospectively, I guess it can kind of make sense to me, but it's still mind-boggling in a lot of ways from what we saw last year, what we knew was on the field, and why it significantly changed my opinion about Gamecock football going into 2022 was just how well Carolina played, how explosive the Gamecocks were on offense, how consistent and solid they were on defense. To me, is a sign of good coaching and a good culture by and large. And I know that gets overused so much. And it was one game, and we try not to overhype it in the whole thing. And all of those things should be in place with a young staff and a proud program and the whole thing. I get that. But to do it as convincingly as Carolina did over the Tar Heels in a game where I just didn't see that coming. They weren't supposed to do that. And if it had happened the other way, would not have surprised me a bit. And then you add in the transfers of Stogner and Rattler from Oklahoma, and year number 2 in a system and the whole thing. It's starting to get me excited. Maybe it took the end of college baseball season yesterday to start to get me really excited and fired up about college football. I know that's blasphemous, but I think that's where I am in my head, trying to not look too far ahead. And again, still 2+ months out the college football season, but that's plenty of time, I think. Perfect amount of time for us to break down what we think we're going to see, why we think we're going to see it, what you hope to see, and get appropriately lathered up for this 2022 season. And from the Gamecock perspective, it is such a breath of fresh air to have not just optimism going in or hope, which you can have with a new coach at this time last year, should have had, absolutely. But then to go see, was it last year? I think Luke Doty was ranked like 105th out of the 130 Division I quarterbacks coming back. And I thought that was really, really low, but I understood it. There just was nothing there to go off of, and Marcus Satterfield didn't offer anything really tangible to change that preseason prediction, and who knows what would have happened had he been healthy and the whole thing. We have no idea. But Spencer Rattler's a completely different deal. And Josh Vann seems to be a completely different player as we sit here in the summer of 2022 than summer of 2021. The proven production is completely different for sure. Now can an offensive line and a running game step up and be anywhere close to what Carolina needs to have a consistent offense? Jaheim Bell on paper right now looking pretty good. And we all know the potential and the explosiveness, the kind of rare combination that he is, the options that he offers. Was really interesting talking to G.A. Mangus last time on the program about how important it is, how valuable it is for guys who just bring such a varied skill set. A guy like Alshon Jeffrey, he mentioned, being able to move around. Ace Sanders, the guy he mentioned specifically, moving around to different wide receiver spots on the offense. Well, to have a guy like Jaheim Bell who can do that, he can run the football, he can get in there and get in somebody's way and block in the H-back tight end position too. So valuable. And now adding a guy in like Austin Stogner, more depth at tight end, and a guy who has had a solid college career out at Oklahoma. To see what the Carolina offense can do, it's going to be fantastic. Yeah, Troy says, I'm with you on this too, Troy. I think July and August have 35 days each because they are without a doubt the two longest months of the year. Totally agree. But there are some longer than others. July and August for Gamecock fans the last several years might as well have been 80 days in some ways, right? And then I think they're longer if you don't have much positive to go off of. And then maybe you could say, well, that actually, it makes me not talk about or think about college football that much more, and it's not a thing. Or the anticipation can be so great when you have so much to look forward to that it makes you feel longer. And maybe that's where Troy's been coming from as a Clemson guy. I can see that. But yeah, July and August typically so much anticipation. I look forward to the month in a lot of ways, just from where I'm sitting and being able to talk about it, because I think it's the optimism or the unknown. So many unknowns out there. And the fact that they can be so drastic, right? This time last year, Spencer Rattler projected as the number 1 overall pick for the NFL draft. And then it went the other way for him. And now sitting as the presumed starting quarterback for Gamecock football. I mean, so much has happened in his life in the last not even year. We just saw it in baseball, just the season that Ole Miss had. So crazy. Start at the top, drop just off the map, and then almost like a rocket trajectory to a national championship. Crazy. Football, it typically isn't that drastic. There's so many, you got to have so many good players. But yeah, things can go wrong pretty quick. And then I think Coastal Carolina, great example of things going right in that other direction and becoming a national story with your consistency and the way that Jamie Chadwell does things differently there with his offense. They've come up with the recipe. It's going to continue to be so difficult to replicate, stay relevant in the whole thing, and that's the trick. But they're in position again. And the position that I see South Carolina football in, it's a tricky one, right? It's trickier than last year. Last year's is pretty simple for a first-year staff, especially coming off of a 2-win season. You win more games than that, and you start to put your stamp on the program. That was a really low bar, right? And there might have been some unrealistic Gamecock fans that wanted Carolina to finish with a winning record or win 8 games or something silly last year. But you can't be logical and rational and look at that roster and look at the schedule and then look at what had happened the year before and then demand or expect that. But that was such a significant jump. Now it's okay, what do you do for an encore? What do you do to keep things going in the right direction? Because that was the obvious problem under the previous regime in South Carolina football. But, I mean, that's how every program is judged, I think. That's why so many Gamecock fans are so frustrated with Gamecock football. It's why the South Carolina men's basketball situation has ended up with Frank Martin not be the head coach. He won games. But to have use my hands here from the visual podcast, so everybody watching on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook can see, going at a level, an even level, right? And then to shoot straight up to the Final Four, well, that raises the baseline expectation for the program so much. And then to just kind of crater right down to no postseason several years in a row. It's just so difficult to sell the program as one that's headed in the right direction, as, hey, come jump on board, come get with us. So that's why fascinating to see what happens this year with the Gamecock football and Shane Beamer. Because again, that bowl game, I'll raise my hand. I'll be at the front of that line. Changed my perception of the program so significantly last year that it's easy for me to lose sight of what I was thinking about the job Shane Beamer was doing after the Tennessee game last year, for instance. What I thought of the future of the Gamecock program 2/3 of the way into last season as opposed to at the very end. But those wins against Florida happened. That win against Florida happened. The win against North Carolina, the bowl game happened. Like, that success did happen. And that's why there's so many positive vibes around South Carolina football and so much optimism. And There always has been, to varying degrees, I guess, this time of year and headed towards the season. But the Will Muschamp, the end of the Will Muschamp era, I think did significantly suck that out of a lot of people. I don't know how it couldn't have. But then Shane Beamer has infused it right back in. So it's a much more enjoyable place to be to talk about it each and every day than the last several seasons. Even going into last year, right? Because there's so much like, hey, who knows? And the expectation level is so low. Don't know what could be fair to a first-year staff to expect. That just going to a bowl game, a tremendous accomplishment for a program that won 2 games the year before. And then how Carolina did that and then how they performed in that game, man, changing things significantly. And yet, as I say that, I got to make sure that you know that I think it would be ridiculous, and that's why I read the over-unders for the season, to expect 8-9 wins in the regular season this year, looking at that schedule. That's why it is at 5.5 for Carolina, one of the lowest in the SEC. Trying to look at, we got Ole Miss at 7.5. I think Mississippi State might be the only one lower than the Gamecock. Nope, 6.5. Missouri at 5.5 as well. And Auburn, I mentioned 5.5. So those are the lowest in the SEC, not counting Vanderbilt, right? They don't count. They're 2.5. Not really a complete outlier. And then I see, man, Virginia Tech at 5.5 and Wake Forest at 8.5. Where we are in 2022 in college football. Southern Cal jumped all the way up to 9.5. Just like that. Add in Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison. There you go. You shoot right up those numbers. It's going to be, it is the new normal right now for sure in college football. I'm going to try to choose to look at it as what can make it so amazing for so many different fan bases. I'm hopeful that's what it's going to be. I think, again, South Carolina and Spencer Rattler and Austin Stogner, a great example of that. Now, the Southern Cal thing, kind of a great example for the other side of the argument, I think, saying, no, this is going to be a few select programs that are going to have ridiculously deep pockets for donors giving NIL opportunities. It's going to be a prime chance for a program like Texas A&M that has always had big boy money to get big boy results paired with that. But I think there's still so much variation. There's so many variables that go into it in college football. And I get it. Odds are Lincoln Riley is going to be able to score some points at Southern Cal. Going to be able, especially with his quarterback that he brought with him from Oklahoma, the guy that won the Biletnikoff Award last year at Pitt, and Jordan Addison transferring over. Those guys are really good players, and they're most likely going to be really good at Southern Cal. But he didn't just bring those players with him. He brought everything with him. And so it's just not how it always works out, especially for college football teams, that you got to have so much going in your direction. That's why this NIL thing that just completely fascinated to see how the results match the investment. How specific players who are obviously really talented, and you got to put Spencer Rattler on that list too, right? Again, seems to be doing everything that you need to do to be a good teammate, to be a good team leader, the whole thing. But not having prior relationships and then coming in with the reputation, with dollar signs attached to you and dollar amounts attached to your name, and it being a lot more public than it ever has before and legal within the rules. We all assume within the rules-ish, let's say. I think it's the best way to go. with the Texas A&M situation and the whole thing. Within the rules-ish is where we are with name, image, and likeness. So with all that other stuff involved, how does that affect locker room, team management, momentum during a season, ultimately results, and where programs fall? 2022, I can't remember a season I am more excited for in so many ways. Right, well past the COVID situation, it seems like, that has made things so difficult in our world, most importantly in the last several years, but definitely has had the effect on sports as well. So in my mind, at least pretty much past that. Now, with where name, image, and likeness is, and having the transfer portal there shift the balance of power so much to players, fascinating. How coaches will react to that and manage that, speak publicly, not just about that, but in general now, the impact that has, the impact these major transfers have at their programs, new coaches in new spots. And the Billy Napier down in Florida, I think it's going to be, that damn Mullen situation, that's still hard for me to wrap my brain around how quickly that unraveled for such a proven guy. And another great reminder of, even when we think we know, sometimes in college football, you don't know. Or it can just, you can lose control of a situation real quick. To have the Saban Jimbo Fisher situation going into this year. The fact that Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach are just kind of givens now in Mississippi, tremendous for the SEC. Have Shane Beamer bringing South Carolina back to somewhere close to relevance, I think is where we are. To have Kentucky still sitting there as on paper the most viable challenger in the East. That's a weird place for the SEC East to be. Georgia coming off the national championship and seemingly just continuing to roll their machine. But those over in the West absolutely hate that. Alabama being number one amongst them. Then the mess at Auburn. Is that going to be able to be turned around? I feel like as I even say that, I'm picturing like a battleship having to turn around. That has taken some hits already, obviously. It doesn't seem like a salvageable situation from where I'm sitting. These are the major headlines that I'm thinking of, the major storyline as we get ready to continue talking season, maybe hit the pinnacle of talking season with SEC Media Days coming up, not too far away. And then actually get preseason camp going in about a month or so. A couple of months from now, we kick off college football season. 2022. So appreciative of where college football is. The schedule change talk has, I think, helped me with that as well. Helped me be optimistic about things moving forward with Oklahoma and Texas coming into the SEC. It's going to be, from my standpoint, from a guy that I never went to Texas games when I lived and worked out in Texas as a local sports guy, but that was always the team. Texas Tech was a little bit closer, but this was Cedric Benson and Chris Sims days, Major Applewhite, Roy Williams, that guy at wide receiver. So they will always be the team in Texas unless Texas A&M can go on some kind of ridiculous run, unless Jimbo Fisher can figure that out. And it ain't going to be just one national championship that would do it. I don't know what it would take. But to have that flagship, to have that brand in college football, to have Oklahoma, which has been a much better football program than Texas in my lifetime, joining the SEC, which was already where it is in college football and college sports in general, just to strengthen it that much more. And now to have to talk about, hey, you're going to see every single team in the SEC at least once every 4 years come to your football stadium. I don't know if I could have even thought to ask that. To see other conferences like the ACC doing that, and in my opinion, then becoming more formidable, I think might be the best way to put that. It's going to be a fun college football season. Really appreciate you guys checking today's program out. Again, the big headline coming off the weekend, Ole Miss winning the College World Series and doing it in a Cinderella fashion, like college baseball gets to see, but not so frequently, right? And to be very clear, Ole Miss, an a traditional Cinderella, what would that be? I don't even know how to do any kind of weird fairy tale analogy. Like, that's a Cinderella who was like a some kind of beauty queen growing up, and then hit on hard times, got mixed up with a bad crowd, and then came back to the original ways. Like, that's the Ole Miss season, right? It reminded me of like Villanova basketball. They weren't even that. Ole Miss was a preseason number one type team. Villanova had a bunch of guys that just played together amazingly in 1985 and knocked off the big boys in Patrick Ewing and Georgetown. So it's hard to even consider them Cinderella. They might have been Cinderella a lot like Virginia in 2015, right? An amazing program that just didn't quite have not even that. I mean, Virginia just didn't quite have the overall, I think, projections that year didn't look as strong on paper, and hit it right and won the title. Ole Miss this year was supposed to be still good and wasn't, and then dominate. So hard to even put a comparison on that, kind of like a lot like Freddie Freeman's weekend. A guy in his prime, coming off a World Series championship, returning to his former organization that fans, players, front office people wanted him badly to stay at. And he ultimately, I think, as I understand the story, being a California native, chose to move his family back closer to his home, his young family. And that was a major, if not the major, determining factor for him to go to the Dodgers. Obviously, getting paid very well and playing for a tremendous team in Major League Baseball doesn't hurt. But I think it took all of those factors for him to not return in a Braves uniform this year, and clearly that takes a toll on him, or took a toll on him. And kind of let it all out this weekend, and it was incredible to watch. I think incredible is the right word. And was hopeful that Atlanta would still hold kind of the upper hand in that baseball karma and win the series, and then blew the 2-0 lead, and the Dodgers took 2 and won last night, no extra innings. So that was a bummer. Yep, Troy does mention favorite Cinderella, 83 Wolfpack. I think I might have said 82 earlier. My fault. I always get that North Carolina Michael Jordan shot, James Worthy run. So that happened first, and then it was 83 NC State team with Jim Valvano, Cinderella Absolutely. Ole Miss, not that, but they are national champs, and good for them and how the fan base embraced it, made the trip out to Omaha. Again, what makes that College World Series so special. A special baseball season from that standpoint, an especially disappointing one, I think, from the South Carolina perspective, both the Gamecocks and Clemson having to move on from their head coach. We're looking for better things to come there. We'll look for better things to come on the program this week. Get some guests involved as we move on. Again, appreciate all you guys' participation. Mark, Troy, Colette, Craig, last few in on the program on the YouTube live stream. If you have not, please subscribe and all that stuff. Like and comment, and got the Instagram account up and running these days. You can find that the same way you can find the other social medias on Facebook and Twitter. Tim Hill UFA is the account for Unrestricted Free Agent. As the show continues to evolve, always appreciate your support. DC, give it a peace sign as well. Be back 8 to 10, streaming live all week long, 8 to 10. Again, the new hours. Thank you guys for doing it a little bit earlier than usual. If you're catching this thing on a replay on any of the major podcast platforms, appreciate that as well. Feel free to drop a comment anytime on those social media accounts, and I'll try to bring it up. Maybe we'll get a conversation going off of that as well. And again, the next couple of months, we got some latitude. We got some room to get creative and have some fun on the show. The show is Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent. That'll do it for the June 27th, 2022 edition.